Well, hello, everybody. I'm Andy Schectman. I suppose you all know that by now. To my right is Kerry Lutz, and I'm sure all of you know that by now. And for a long time, I've been going on everyone else's show and wondering, well, maybe I should attempt to do my own. So Kerry, my new neighbor, was kind enough to come over and help get me set up, and we figured we'd launch show number one. I don't even have a name for the show yet, but it's something I've been meaning to do.
The Miles Franklin Report. Come on, man.
All right, the Miles Franklin Report. There it is. So, yeah, little by little, maybe we'll call it little by little, then all at once. That's my favorite mantra. In fact, I got a picture over there that speaks to that. I had it made little by little, then all at once. It means a lot to me. There's a lot you could say for logarithmic decay and how it feeds into the world these days, whether it be economically, socially, morally, you name it. Things just seem to be changing little by little, and then you wake up one day and it's all at once. And so anyways, so too is my aspirations of starting a show. Little by little by little, I've been attempting to do this, getting pieces and having them sit unopened on my desk, and finally Kerry twisted my arm enough to get this going. So we figured, since we just got everything set up, we would talk a little bit about silver. Kerry was prodding me to ask me why silver wouldn't get above 30. I mentioned that it did today, and he was saying, do you think it would stay there? And why the hell hasn't it gone higher? Is that about right?
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. But before we get into that, $2,500 gold. So technically, 2,500 means nothing, but psychologically in the world, that's a quarter of 10,000. I mean, it's a big, big number.
Yeah.
And we finally breached it. And we're met universally with yawns all across the globe, except for the people who know.
Yeah, I find that crazy, actually, to be honest with you. The lack of any media participation, the lack of any fanfare whatsoever is shockingly quiet. I mean, coming from someone who's done this for 35 years almost, when gold was $252, if you told me it would be 10 times that price and it would have virtually no attention and virtually no investment by the United States mainstream. Rick Rule often talks about 0.5% allocation from Joe and Jane Sixpack all the way up to the Harvard Endowment Fund. And something that you follow perhaps a little bit more closely than I do, the mining shares. Now, I have a mining share portfolio because I've worked very closely with Sprott USA for a very long time. And out of respect, since they have been kind enough to trust me with their clients, I have a managed account there. And I don't even know exactly all the shares that I own. I trust my broker there, who's a friend, well enough to represent my best interests. And that might not be the smartest way to do things, but the bottom line is that I know I have a nice allocation to mining shares. And what's even more startling to me is that if you told me gold would be $2,500 and the mining shares would be beaten down the way that they have, I would say there's just no possible way that could happen. What do you think?
I think little by little, look, Newmont just announced a couple of weeks ago, like, record earnings. And I almost bought options on that stock, but doesn't count, didn't do it. But it was at 40, 41 forever, and it didn't move. And then all of a sudden, hey, they had $400 million higher profit, and Newmont went up. So the quality juniors are going to get bought up. There is no other choice, because the majors, the Newmonts, the Agnicos, the Barricks, they're all seeing declining reserves. So that's the argument for it. Why it hasn't gone up? Well, I think that there's a lot of people who've lost a lot of money in the sector over the years, and they're literally going to have to be dragged kicking and screaming, get back into it. But that's the opportunity. Hey, how long do we sit around and wait for gold to get this point?
I think that's really it, though, Kerry. I mean, I think that is really hitting the nail on the head, is that it's like the little boy who cried wolf, and the market doesn't believe it. I think that's what it is. In fact, I think even the bulls don't believe it, that we've witnessed so many pullbacks that are counterintuitive that we're so far past when this should have all happened, and it's happened so many times. And how many times do I need to hear it? And I think the market just doesn't believe it, and that's what to me potentially makes this so very strong. Rick Rule about in this environment he would expect to see the majors go first, the ones that you mentioned, the Barracks and the Newmonts, and then the mid-tier majors, and then the juniors, and then the explorations, and of course also the maybe my favorite, the royalty stocks.
The royalties for sure.
But it's interesting when you put it in that light, and I think the same thing is true about silver. People just don't believe that it will go, and I think that's fair. That's a fair point. We've watched it get hammered for so many years, and so many times when the fundamentals would say that it shouldn't. And yet gold, here we are showing or leading the way. Now, that's also typically the way things go. Gold typically leads the way in these moves, and silver follows suit, oftentimes outpacing percentage-wise gold's gains. But you said something to me this afternoon that made me say, well, why don't I show the PowerPoint that I did at Rick's show, at least a few of the slides, to explain, in my mind, why silver has been held back. I'm going to share my screen, if you don't mind, Kerry, and I'm going to show people here.
Green one.
So there we go. I'm still a rookie here. All right. I hope we're sharing our screen here. Yes. I think we are. All right.
Got it.
So we're going to skip past this one. We don't need any of that nonsense. But here's a smoking gun as far as I'm concerned, right? So let's start here. Now, this, you can Google all of this. This is and this is courtesy of the Pickaxe. And John Little is a hell of a researcher. I will give him that. And he's brought a lot of things to the market that us silver bugs should be thankful for. And this is one of them. There's a subcommittee in October of 1942, a subcommittee hearing on banking and currency. You can see it, S.2768. And it was a bill to authorize for war purposes the silver held or owned by the United States. And as you can see here, just by reading the first couple of paragraphs here, the present consumption of silver for war purposes is at a rate of about 100 million ounces a year and is growing rapidly, according to the War Production Board. It is only a matter of months before war demands will have increased sufficiently to require at least 200 million ounces a year. All right, so that's 1942, right? And if we think about where we are now, I gave a speech where at Jay Martin's conference in Vancouver 2 years ago, where I said to the audience, there's 500 ounces in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. Excuse me. And the man came up to me after the speech and he said, you know, I'm a consultant for the DOD. I worked on the team that developed the Tomahawk, and I know that there's silver in it. I don't know how much. I'll let you know. And I never heard from him again. But I went back there this year in January, gave a different speech, and there he was. And he was standing there with a handful of photos. He said, "You remember me?" I said, "I do." And he showed me a bunch of photos. He said, "Don't worry, this is all declassified." He said, "But you're right. There is between 13 and 14 kilograms of silver in the tip of a Tomahawk." And he showed me all sorts of pictures and how they had difficulty getting it to launch vertically because it was designed to come out of torpedo tubes of a submarine and all sorts of stuff. It was an interesting conversation. But what I took away from it is that in these high-tech weapons, silver is used, and copiously at that. So in any case, keep that in mind as we move forward. Here in 1942, we're told 200 million ounces would be needed for military equipment, and the level of sophistication is exponentially higher now. So here are the supply-demand numbers that come out of the Silver Institute. And if we look at the demand section here, first of all, we see once again there's a 260 million ounce shortfall projected between supply and demand. But look at the demand totals. We have industrial demand, which is
solar
9%, electrical and electronics, of which photovoltaics 20%, brazing, alloys, and solders 3%. And by the way, I have a client who is a mechanic for United Airlines. He said the amount of silver solder inside these airplanes is extraordinary. anyways, other industrial, 3% or 9%, photography, -3%, jewelry, 4%, silverware, 7%, net investment. So nowhere in here do we see military applications at all? Zero. And yet we're told there is a 200 plus million ounce shortfall. We are told that we are running out of silver in above ground. And when we look at the supply demand numbers, nowhere on there does it mention military. And in 1942, we know they were using up to 200 million ounces a year. And as a result, take a look at this, and maybe this chart will help underscore what's happening. I don't know if that's in your way. We got to get another microphone here. So this is the COMEX market. And if you can see, the red line represents the 4 largest commercial banks short. And the green line represents the 8 largest. So the 4 plus the other 4. So there are 8 banks in essence right now, 8 banks, all Western banks. And we can say they would be Standard Chartered, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, JP Morgan, Citibank, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, and I don't know who else. But the point of it is that there are 8 commercial banks right now that have the largest concentrated short position of any commodity ever traded in the history of the COMEX market, period. And you have to ask yourself, why the hell would 8 banks be shorting silver when countries like India have imported over 700 million ounces last year, over the last 2 years, rather? Why would they do that when China right now, according to Sean Kun from Dolly Varden and according to others that I've talked with, who have publicly told me in videos recently that China is going all around Latin America, buying up the doré bars and the silver concentrate, paying way more than the West will pay, and doing so to get it in unrefined fashion, send it back to China and refine it there. So it's not pulled off of an exchange. It isn't factored into any pricing mechanism. It's in essence invisible. And this from the second largest producer of silver in the world, China, who has just become a net importer instead of a net exporter. So when you look at countries like China and India, who are voraciously accumulating silver, using this stupidity, this brain dead weaponization of the commodity market, where 8 banks are suppressing the price of silver to this degree, to the degree of the largest concentrated short position ever seen. And look when we contrast it to crude oil way down here. Remember how they put crude oil at -40 a barrel in 2020? The fact that you have 8 banks shorting this price tells you there's something important about silver. Now think about what we were just saying. Think of all of the weapons that are being created, the high-tech weapons in aerospace and stealth bombers and all of this stuff that the military-industrial complex is involved in. We just voted to give another, I don't know, $150 million or so on top of all the billions we've given the Ukraine, and almost all of it is in weaponry, all of it. They're giving all of this money to the military-industrial complex to make high-tech weaponry, and the only way that they're able to create this stuff and to sell it all around the world is to keep the price of silver down. And what is interesting about that, when you see this and then look at this frame, we can see that the people around the world, like China and India, are using this suppression against us. They understand what we are doing. They understand that we are holding down the price, but they were never motivated, coordinated, sophisticated, wealthy enough, and to stand for delivery. But that's what they are doing. And this is the LBMA, the London Bullion Metals Association, who said it's the second lowest, or nearly the lowest amount of silver they have ever had in their vault since they started keeping records. You're seeing the same thing on COMEX, massive deliveries and rehypothecation on COMEX of over 1,500%, where 15 people think they own the same contract. If everyone stood for delivery, one may get the silver, the rest get cash settled. It was like Bernie Madoff had a good deal going until people said, give me my money back. So this is what I wanted to show you and get your opinion, your feeling on it. So the question really to me is, if silver is more or less not even industrial, to me, it's strategic. It's needed in so many things, including military, and they strip it from the supply demand numbers. We have 8 banks shorting it to the degree that no one's ever seen in any commodity ever. And then we see this. We see the vaults being bled dry, and they're being bled dry by the countries who are now smart to our con and are using it against us, kind of like jujitsu, where you use your opponent's leverage against them. This is why silver hasn't gone. And this is what I think when we talk about little by little by little by little, then bang all at once. The all at once moment is when there is no silver left to be delivered on these Western exchanges. And then it moves to the Shanghai. So I'll just finish one more thing and I'll let you jump in here. Shanghai silver has been priced $4 an ounce higher for the past couple of months than LBMA, and then by COMEX, it's continuing to go higher. And in the past, roughly 3 months, the combined volume of the Shanghai Metals Exchange and the Shanghai Futures Exchange has gone up over 200%. And that volume now surpasses the COMEX, effectively making it the second most highly traded exchange in the world behind the LBMA. It is gaining legitimacy. And when these exchanges are viewed for the scam that they are, this leveraged, rehypothecated game where no one ever stood for delivery, allowed us to fool the world into thinking our bond market and our currencies and all of these commodities we needed. One was of strength and the other is to suppress the price. All of this will be exposed, and you will see, I believe, a repricing of metals and repricing of commodities off of these exchanges to exchanges across the globe, where the people who run these exchanges are the ones who produce it, accumulate it, and understand it. And we have really squandered, I think, the privilege of being able to set these prices with a fair exchange, because the concept of a fair exchange, in my opinion, through rehypothecation, through the LBMA, able to trade almost 3 billion ounces of silver per day. That's 3.5 times annual global mine supply.
Right.
It's coming to an end. And that's why I think silver hasn't gone yet. And this is what I wanted to show you. So what do you think? Am I on something or am I on something?
Do you remember the guy Biederman? He was around like when I first started in the space. And he said, silver is the worst investment in the world. And it's going to continue to be the worst investment in the world until one day you're going to wake up and silver is going to be the best investment in the world. And it seems to me that that's where we're heading. I don't know if the actual military consumption is hidden in those numbers. I don't know if they're sitting on a huge mountain of it someplace in the U.S. Very possible, because my understanding was from World War II, they accumulated way more than they ever needed. They needed it for the atomic bomb, I believe, and they were sitting on billions of ounces of it. I have no idea how much. And, I think it's very likely, though, that there's an awakening coming here. And just like we figured out the emperor had no cortex, we're going to figure out that the emperor's jewelry is 8-carat gold filled fake stuff, right? That the crown jewels got hawked a long time ago with the crown.
Well, Bix Swear did a great interview last year. I remember I was out in the backyard. I do a lot of research for my podcast, and so I'll listen to your show. I listened to the one with Martin Armstrong recently, and which was fantastic, and
Thank you.
and others, and to gather information to talk about. I spent a lot of time researching, and I remember laying on my on a raft in my swimming pool, listening to Bix Weir's 3-part interview with Jack Sermon, and he's the man who developed really the Silver Eagle program for the U.S. Mint. He's 75 years old, and I don't know if he was clearing his conscience or what, but I literally almost fell into the pool after he said what he said. And I think it's an interview people should really listen to and ask yourself, is there a fine line between conspiracy and reality? And I have a hard time believing that there isn't. And I don't look at myself as being conspiratorial, but when you look at the facts, it just continually all around us. And one of my favorite lines lately is it too stupid to be stupid, or is it too stupid to not be planned? But when we listen to what Jack Sermon said, he said, look, this was in 2020 and 2021. He said, the Mint came to me and they said, we want you to only to release as few Silver Eagles as you possibly can to hold back public outcry. And in all of 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, most of it, the U.S. Mint was the model of inefficiency, where I could import coins from Australia, South Africa, United Kingdom at fractions of the price of Silver Eagles, which we were buying back from the public at $11 over spot, $12 over spot, selling for 13 over spot or 14 over spot. Massive premiums, massive spreads, not enough silver to go around. And he said he was told to do that from his superiors. Well, who would his superior be? That'd be Janet Yellen.
The Secretary of the Treasury.
Right. And so Janet said, just as few as possible. This went on for 3 years. He said, before I was working for the Mint, I was on the supply side. I was an authorized purchaser for one of the big companies. And I know how this side works. And they came to us at the end of last year. At the time, it would have been 2021, or 2022. He was talking about. And he said, we'll take another 36 million, or they said, we'll take another 36 million coins, and we gave them like another 12 million. Mm-hmm. The point of it is that the U.S. Mint is supposed to issue as many Silver Eagles as is demanded by public. Yeah. It's in the charter. It's law. And they didn't. 100% they didn't. So are they stockpiling silver? Were they putting it away and viewing it as strategic? And when you look at the gold that went missing, from Saddam Hussein and from Gaddafi, where did all of that gold and silver go? And what about the 12 billion that the Ukraine sold to fund the war? My point is that we don't update any of these numbers, gold and silver. But I will tell you, in my mind, Kerry, the military-industrial complex is probably the ones pulling the string, not Biden. And
for sure, they run everything.
Right. And so if you need silver to make these weapons and to make high-tech aerospace and weaponry, and then even things like nuclear submarines, you need lots of silver. You have to keep the price down, or very quickly you end up in trouble. And maybe it is a conspiracy, maybe I am off base, but when you see them take it out of the supply demand numbers, and when you see 7 Western banks shorting a commodity that is globally demanded and running out of availability in terms of its geologic footprint, it's at a 7-to-1 ratio right now, meaning 7 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold mined. It was 16-to-1 for 5,000 years. So it's decreasing in nature. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it's accelerating in its uses. Take military out of it. You have green and digital applications that need copious amounts of it. This Green New Deal, without silver, you're in trouble. And of course, the new Samsung battery. As someone who, I think you might drive a Tesla, and now they're talking about they're talking about these new batteries that will charge in 9 minutes and will go like 600 miles or whatever it is, and that's a game changer. But they will take over a kilo of silver per car, and so Is it conspiracy? I don't know, but I do know that there was a whole consortium of companies in Canada that have petitioned the Canadian government to reclassify silver as a strategic metal. In my mind, they're onto something, and we ought to do the same thing too. Maybe we just haven't been honest about it, and instead are doing shenanigans like this in order to fund the ever increasing war drum that we see all around the world.
Yeah, well, it's definitely beating loudly now. That's for sure. It's hard to know. It's kind of like you're going to have to connect the dots after it happens, because we're not able to connect the dots as it happens. We get some glimpses here and there. We get some indications, but we never really know for sure until the dam bursts. But clearly something isn't right. Why silver, of all the commodities in the world, is there that kind of short position? Is it just, we make so much money at it? And remember what happened to Bear Stearns, right? And then they had to hand off the shorts because they were gone. So it seems like something is amiss.
Well, that's another video that people need to watch. That's probably the most important video I've ever watched in this industry. And that's Chris Marcus, Arcadia Economics, his video with Bart Chilton, who was the former head of the CFTC, the Commodity Future Trading Commission, the commodity police, where he admitted to Chris in an interview, he said, Bear Stearns failed, and we being Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke, called Jamie Dimon into the office and said, we need you to take over Bear Stearns short position.
I think the way it happened was, hey, Jamie, it's great to see you. You are now the proud owner of Bear Stearns' silver short position.
Right.
Welcome to Wall Street.
Well, and that's pretty much the way it went. And Jamie said, well, listen, guys, I'll do it, but
I don't really want it.
I'll be in violation of position limits. okay, that's fine. Just get your house in order. You have like 90 days to do so, and all is good. Well, at the end of the 90-day period, he said he went into his superiors and said, well, Jamie didn't shorten his position. He's increased it. He's in violation of our agreement and antitrust law. They need to be prosecuted. And he said this on Chris's podcast, and Google it. Chris Marcus, Arcadia Economics, Bart Chilton. He said he was told to back down, that it was a political decision, whatever that means. And he died about a week later. And I'm not saying there's a coincidence there, but he did. He died. And he admitted this in Chris's show. Maybe he was clearing his conscience. I don't know. But when you think of JP Morgan receiving a $920 million fine for suppressing the metals market, their head trader, Michael Nowak, who I had lunch with in New York City a few years back, he didn't even know I was at the table. There were about 20 guys there. And he's in prison. And yet that year, their metals desk, JP's metals desk, made $1 billion. They were fined $920 million. They got to keep the $80 million. And they're still allowed to be the custodian of the world's largest silver trust. Something is wrong. But when you think he was then told to back down, it was a political decision. And now think about what I was saying about suppressing the price of silver to fund military industrial complexes, acquisition and development of high-tech weaponry. So this is a lot bigger than it just being a commodity that is used for solar panels. And there's a lot that goes on that we don't know about. But I will tell you this. Martha Stewart went to jail for insider trading, and JP Morgan is handed the biggest fine the Justice Department ever laid out, and yet they're still allowed to be this custodian of SLV. Talk about the fox guarding the hen house.
You can trust JP.
Well, right. That's the point. And I just think people, when we talk about connecting the dots, it's I've been doing this for 4 years, publicly saying this is what I think. A lot of it's come true, which is very scary. And I'm out here saying this. It's too stupid to be stupid. Wake up. And, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm stupid for saying it. But I will tell you this, Kerry. Nothing I have ever heard would explain why you have 8 banks shorting a commodity like this that is in a massive, this is a shortage now going on 3 years. This is a structural shortage. It's not getting better. In an asset that is it's depleting in nature, it's increasing in industrial applications and monetary applications, and yet you have all these banks shorting it with countries like India and China voraciously accumulating it. Seems as dumb as a mud wall to me.
Well, our government has never been the brightest, that's for sure, and they certainly haven't gotten smarter over the years. So it's run by sociopaths, so they have no limits, no constraints to anything they do. So anything you're telling me would not surprise me. It's true. It seems more likely than not. Something is going on there. Something's amiss. Something doesn't add up. The biggest commodity market in the world, energy, right? And the hedges out there are like minuscule compared to this.
Well, that's the point. That's the point. And silver is such a small market. Why? And I think that if it were 1 or 2 banks, fine, but 8 banks holding down the price the way that they are, it's just something is silly about all this. And like I said, when you see China flying around the world paying way more than the West will pay for unrefined silver and concentrate and sending it back and refining it there, that means all of that silver they're buying directly from the miners themselves isn't coming off of an exchange, and so the price isn't affected. And not to mention, how many people know they're the second largest producer of silver in the world, behind Mexico, and the largest producer of gold in the world.
Yeah.
And they were always net exporters because of all the byproduct mining they do of other metals. They would have tons of extra silver at their smelters. That's now all being kept in-house, and they are a net importer. I think Zoltan Pozsar would be the guy that I would like to have on your show if I were you, and someday on mine. Because he's talking about Bretton Woods 3. He or she who has the commodities wins. And I think China and India and the BRICS nations are trying their best to show us that without showing it to us, if you will.
Yeah, well, what does Salenti say? When in doubt, start a war.
Right? And he also says when people lose everything, they lose it. Well, Kerry, I really do appreciate you. I know this was a little bit raw for our first go. We didn't even have anything really to talk about,
we always got things to talk about.
My wife tells me I never shut up. I can always go. Just put a quarter in me. But
you ought to know.
Yeah, she should. I do appreciate you hooking me up like this,
Of
and
course.
this will be number one of a gazillion,
All right.
and I'll make sure that you're back again sometime soon for
got it.
sure. But thank you, brother.
Anytime, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. So that's it. We'll see you again next time.
Hey, give them your website.
Oh, that's right. If for any information, best to send an email to info@milesfranklin.com, where we will provide our price list we keep close to the vest, one that is really tough to beat. Any questions you've heard on this or anything else, info@milesfranklin.com, and we will be sure, and with no obligation, send you what you're looking for. If it's just the price list, that's great. If you want to be contacted, put your phone number down. And thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
And make sure you subscribe to the Miles Franklin newsletter, because it's got vital information that you can't live without.
This is number one. Won't be so rusty next time.
We're good. All right, all.